I've been for quite a while researching various depictions and various accounts of vampirism in history, in folklore, in newspaper articles. And as far as a non-revenant, non-zombie-like, cognizant vampire, as we know them today, as in depicted movies today, this is the earliest one I've been able to find. There is another story that I'm trying to verify that happened probably 7 years earlier, but as far as being in a newspaper, this is the first one that I have located, the earliest one I've located. It's mostly accounted in the introduction to John Polidori's The Vampire, but I have actually seen the article, photos of the article, so it is an actual article, not just a made-up introduction for a book. And it goes like this. In the London Journal of March 1732, there is a curious and, of course, credible account of a particular case of vampirism, which is stated to have occurred at Madragia in Hungary. It appears that upon examination of the commander-in-chief and many magistrates of the place, they positively and unanimously affirmed that, about 5 years before, a certain hayduke named Arnold Paul had been heard to say that at Kasovia, on the frontiers of the Turkish Servia, he had been tormented by a vampire. But he had found a way to rid himself of the evil by eating some of the earth out of the vampire's grave and then rubbing himself with some of the vampire's blood. This precaution, however, did not prevent him from becoming a vampire himself. For about 20 or 30 days after his death and burial, many persons complained of having been tormented by Arnold Paul, and a deposition was made that 4 persons had been deprived of life by his attacks. To prevent further mischief, the inhabitants, having consulted their chief bailiff, took up the body and found it, as it's supposed to be usual in cases of vampirism, fresh and entirely free from corruption, and emitting at the mouth, nose, and ears pure and florid blood. Proof having been thus obtained, they resorted to the accustomed remedy. A stake was driven entirely through the heart and body of Arnold Paul, at which he is reported to have cried out as dreadfully as if he had been alive. This done, they cut off his head, burnt his body, and threw his ashes into his grave. The same measures were adopted with the corpses of those persons who had previously died from vampirism, lest they should, in their turn, become agents upon others who survived them. So one of the interesting things about this is there are some things in this story that are purely revenant zombie folklore, like taking the blood and ingesting it of the vampire, which seems counterintuitive to the act of not wanting to become a vampire because you're ingesting some of their infected blood. So that's interesting. But that has also carried over into modern literature and movies and horror stories about how you have to ingest their blood to be infected and become a vampire. That also goes back to the zombie. You have to be bitten to be infected, etc. So there's definitely still some crossover with zombies here. It also touches on eating some of the dirt on the grave, which goes back to the whole vampires wanting to bring in dirt from their homeland, having to rest in dirt, having to carry some of their dirt. So this all incorporates many of the things we see in modern vampire literature and movies, and even antiquities, such as Sheridan Le Fanu, Stoker, Polidori. It all comes into this. So I find that fascinating because this article was written a good 100 years, almost 100 years before Polidori wrote The Vampire. In later videos, in the next installment, when I talk about the other earlier story that I've read but haven't been able to find actual proof for, I will go ahead and talk a little bit more about how all this plays into modern literature, how it differs from revenants, and where I think things we think of as being canon for vampires today comes from. Thanks for watching.